We are back. You see the long lines. We've been talking about the topic of the voter ID law in Wisconsin. More on that as the evening goes along. Chris Jansing, after spending much of the day in Waukesha, is now in the village of Jackson, Wisconsin tonight, having spoken to, among others, Donald Trump earlier today. Chris?
I did indeed, and here is one of three, along with Waukesha, these counties where Republicans are very, very heavy. It's one of the most Republican areas in the country, most reliably Republican. It's been busy all day long. Let me just take a quick check, if I can, of how many voters have gone through here. 2,540. We're looking at a 60% turnout. When I talked to Donald Trump today, one of the reasons he told me he thought he was going to do really well was because of turnout, seemingly not understanding that in these three counties, high turnout favors Ted Cruz. He also was completely unaware of these reports in Politico, by NBC News, on the cover of New York Magazine, reports that his campaign is in disarray, fighting between the people who have been with him for years and the new political types who are coming in. And I also asked him about some of the criticism he's taken as I've talked to voters over this last week that I've been here on the ground in Wisconsin. His criticism of the governor, his criticism of the Speaker of the House, his criticism of talk radio hosts. Here's what he told me. And you don't feel ill-served, for example, to go on to a very popular talk radio show and you said you didn't know that they had been leading an anti-Trump
because if you listen to that, I don't mind that. I mean, you go into the enemy camp sometimes, but you have to take on the enemy. He's not a very smart guy, not a very bright guy. And if you listen to the entire show, you would have said Donald Trump totally won that debate. I was on the show for 15 minutes, and everybody that listened to that show said, you convinced me. I've had many people call me that were going to vote against me. They listened to that show. By the end of the show, and they wrote me I have 2 or 3 letters, they wrote and they tweeted and all of these, and they said that by the end of that show, you have totally convinced me I'm voting for Trump. So, I mean, sometimes you go into unfriendly territory. That's part of the game.
He also, by the way, dismissed the polls that show as many as 3 out of every 4 women view him unfavorably. So we'll see what happens tonight in the only poll that counts. In Waukesha County, by the way, I just checked there. They're in past the 50 percentile as well. So again, in these kinds of heavily Republican counties that favor the governor, it's not good news that there's such high turnout. In fact, it looks like record turnout and will favor Ted Cruz. Brian?
All right, Chris Jansing in the small town of Jackson, Wisconsin, where turnout, as we heard, 60% or over. The Stop Trump movement was robust this cycle in the state of Wisconsin. As Donald Trump found out, there is a robust local network of conservative radio talk show hosts. One of them, Charlie Sykes. We were just talking about his show, Donald Trump's call into his show. That got a lot of the news agenda earlier in the week. Then came the town hall. Young woman with a question on abortion. Chris Matthews, the moderator, used that as the basis and then went in 12 times with follow-up questions on abortion. That resulted in the other story. Both gentlemen happened to be together in Milwaukee. Chris?
Well, let me have Charlie Sykes with me right now, and I don't know what to say at this point because Trump is going after you now. But your interview with him was pretty civil.
I thought so, but apparently I've been living in his head for the last week.
Yeah, I think that's a condition.
I think he spent more time talking about me than about Hillary Clinton,
well,
which
he put
says
you on
something.
The map. You know, he did do that.
Well,
national map.
It turns out that he wants to be leader of the free world, but he's kind of thin-skinned.
Let me ask you about radio. I asked you about this earlier tonight. It seems to me, I do pay attention to Rush Limbaugh, Laura Ingraham, people like that, Sean Hannity. It does seem to be there's almost a universality of opposition to Trump in that sort of day-to-day, hour-to-hour conservative radio world.
No, I think a lot of the national guys have been drinking the Kool-Aid, but here in Wisconsin, I think it has been pretty anti-Trump.
Right.
And I think that what you're seeing here in Wisconsin is what happens when he doesn't have that air cover. What happens when he doesn't have people on the air who are making excuses for him or rationalizing or spinning. And I think you're going to see that, particularly in southeastern Wisconsin, that once Donald Trump is challenged, once he's asked tough questions, either by me or by you, he doesn't do very well. And you have voters here who are very savvy. They're battle-tested. They pay attention. They can see when somebody is faking it, when they are the real deal.
What did you sense of Trump having somewhat of a penetrating opportunity with him? Did you have a sense that he hadn't given thought to the issues you care about?
And I think that's exactly right. It's not so much that he's not a conservative or a liberal. he just really hasn't thought about this. There's kind of no.
Could he have run as a liberal Democrat if he had chosen to?
I think he could have. Sure, absolutely. On his positions on socialized medicine or tax increases, a lot of those things could have been a populist Democrat candidate. And again, here in Wisconsin, we have a lot of actual conservative Republicans. Paul Ryan, Scott Walker. We know the difference.
Let me interview you.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Trump has grabbed hold of something with the Republican voter, 45% now with it. Something about nationalism, something about we're getting pushed around too much. It's not just a white working class guy. There's a sense we've been shoved around on immigration, stupid wars, trade. Had the establishment in your party failed to address those issues convincingly in the way he has, because he's taken the votes away from them.
Well, obviously, yes. And there's going to have to be a reckoning at some point. You have to ask, why couldn't we have come up with a messenger who was more substantive? I mean, Rick Santorum actually did talk about some of these things without